Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Here once again to try to light the way along your path to being a real estate rebel. Also in recovery mode. It has been 6 days since my knee surgery, and I cannot recommend it. If we were going to have today's show be a review on getting a left quadricep tendon reattached to your patella, I would have to give it a thumbs down. Not a good time. I had started last week thinking, you know, I'll be ready to do a show after the surgery. I'll have all the gear ready to go, and I'll hunker down and start doing shows right there Tuesday evening. And man, was that optimism shattered fast. I'm sure you can tell there's an audio difference from today's show. I'm using my mobile mic in a very not good acoustic room. With the laptop, and I can, even in my headphones as I'm listening to the show as I do it, I can tell that there's a pretty big difference here. So the sound quality level is probably not going to be great until I can get myself back into, I guess you could call it my studio. It also works as my office, but it's set up much more specifically for doing podcasts. So I apologize for that. But it's been a very interesting experience. I have a big honkin' cast on my leg, which is driving me nuts. And I've really had to sort of pick my time for doing this show, because I kind of had a choice for that for the first 3, 4, 5 days. The choice has been really between either not having enough painkillers in me to the point where the pain makes it nearly impossible to concentrate for any extended period of time, or be so high on painkillers that I'm hallucinating that what the cast is doing is actually cooking my leg inside of it, which is then causing bugs to come into the cast to eat my leg. So that's sort of been my experience over the last week. That was one of the more interesting dreams, whatever I guess you could call it. I mean, I woke up believing that that's what was happening to my leg. I had one very strange one where I thought my mother had her brain transplanted into a pug's body, a dog. And during this dream, that all seemed like a very normal thing. And I was asking my sister how she ever explained to her friends that her mother had chosen to put her brain into a body of a dog, and we could hear my mother barking at us as if to complain that we're complaining that she's had her brain put into the dog of a body. So I have no idea there may be some of you out there are experienced in psychology, and you can get more deeply into how screwed up that makes me, that these are the sorts of dreams that I have when I am on pain medication. So there you go. Or if you'd like to practice your amateur psychology, please feel free to jump in and give it a go. So I thought we would roll out this week's shows with an examination of some myths that I thought were interesting. You know, I read an awful lot of different articles. I'm not someone who likes to subscribe to just one particular source. So I have a few search engine scripts out there, not scripts, and it makes me sound like I'm a programmer. I have a few Google searches really out there that just go out and search for real estate related news items. And so I end up getting stuff from all kinds of different sites. And I think it really gives a unique perspective sometimes where with the exact same data, two different sites will come to two very different conclusions. And sometimes I'm able to blend that and come up with a more reasonable conclusion based on the data that everybody's sharing. So that's, you know, one thing I like to hope I bring to this is a daily value kind of thing for you. But I had one that came across my desk here from the Motley Fool that I thought was kind of worth discussing. When did they publish this one? I don't see a date on it. This is one of those sites that did. Oh, there we go. But it was the beginning of December. But they had an article titled, Don't Fall Victim to These 3 Real Estate Investing Myths. And, you know, it's the way it was phrased here, it's as if they're trying to talk to you about not getting tricked by something. And that's not really what's going on here. But I think one good thing that it did, they talked to several quote-unquote experts in the real estate world. And while I guess their positions or insights are interesting, they're really less myths and more "don't be an idiot when you get involved in real estate" sort of comments. So I thought it'd be good to go through them. Sometimes we can let our enthusiasm overtake rational thought, or it's hard to connect to just a critical thinking brain that comes up with the idea of, given this information, maybe it would make sense to do this, that has less to do with you having any particular insights into something you're new to, like real estate, and more just to do with trying to on your own see the connections between things and what makes sense. So I thought we'd start with this. Now, this first person that they talked to was Sean Williams. And in this, I'm assuming that Sean is a fella. Yeah, I see a picture of him. There he is. Sean Williams is a fella. And he argues that the most pervasive myth when it comes to investing in real estate is that buying a home is a great investment. And I guess given the way he puts this together, sure, I buy that. It depends on what your mindset is, because that's really what it comes down to. He goes on to say that buying multiple homes and relying on rental income from those homes can actually be a good investment. However, purchasing your primary home and relying on it to fuel your retirement is rarely ever a good idea. So I guess and I often tell my clients, don't purchase your personal home with an idea that this is going to be your retirement fund moving forward. He presents actually some interesting data relating to that, to the assumptions that we put on real estate about appreciation. I'm not an investor who assumes or relies on appreciation to be a primary element of how my market decisions will succeed. One reason I don't do that is because I have absolutely no control over that part. I prefer to try to bank on profits that come to me based on actions I take or things that I do, right? I can control that. Maybe that's the anal retentive part of me kind of coming out on that one. But I like to assume that the market is not going to treat me particularly well. It's not going to treat me particularly bad. So there's kind of a range that I'm going to assume the market is going to do. But I don't factor any of that in terms of what the return will be. If it comes time where I decide I'm thinking about selling a property that I own, if I'm making money on that, great. I probably wouldn't sell it if I wouldn't make my money back. I'd probably just continue to rent it, assuming that that's still a profitable proposition. And then if I've made good decisions all along the way up till then, it should still be a good decision, right? But I thought there were some interesting numbers that he put out here that I thought was kind of neat, because I think it feeds into this idea we've talked about before, where folks read the headlines, right? Or they only go off of their recent experience. And one thing that feeds that is the fact that homeowners mostly remember the doubling in home prices between 1997 and 2007. And he points out that was an anomaly based on data from Robert Shiller's Irrational Exuberance. And that's a book for anyone who's interested in it. Quote, between 1890 and 1990, homes did go up at a rate that outpaced inflation, but only by an average of 0.021% per year. Even more interestingly, and we'll talk about this in a second, between 1950 and 1997, home prices rose by an even more depressing 0.08%. Now, so it's interesting to go with these numbers. The more interesting numbers to go with are the 1950 to 1997 numbers, because they're more relevant to you, right? I mean, 1950 to 1997, that's 40 years. Well, 47 years, actually. And that's a time frame that makes more sense to someone like you, right? None of us are going to be having these inflationary things affecting our investments in a 100-year timeline. It just doesn't make sense to plot them out that way. It makes more sense to plot them out over a 20-year, a 30-year, or a 40-year time frame. I actually think 47 years is actually even more out there. So the relevance to that data versus your life or what you're going to be doing in real estate really doesn't help you that much. But here's another thing. You have to understand the time frames here. Now remember, in 1890, people were celebrating the fact that we were connected by a railroad. There were no planes. Cars weren't a thing. So the a lot of the things that I think feed an economy like ours, or that feed this growth in housing and whatnot, simply didn't exist before the 20th century. So you have to kind of look at the times in which these numbers occurred. And it makes absolute sense to me that if you could take those numbers just from 1890 to 1990, that you'd see that they would outpace inflation. It actually surprises me that it outpaced it by as much as it did in terms of being 0.21%. And between 1950 and 1997, that's a little bit more interesting because a lot of revolutions happened during that time period. You saw the rise of some urban areas dominating different industries, whether we're talking about the automotive industry in Detroit, or we're talking about the computer industry in Silicon Valley, or anywhere else that sort of has a claim to fame that relates to some sort of an industry. What I think is interesting today is that everything's more volatile in nature and so more interconnected with foreign economies and those types of things. So I think that volatility kind of plays into housing costs and where housing is hot, where it wasn't quite that way before. But I get his point, and I actually think that it makes some good sense. So the very first thing would be, I guess as a myth, would be purchasing your primary home and relying on it to fuel your retirement. And again, I don't advise my clients that this should be their strategy. If you want to make your home part of an investment strategy, even if you don't think you're going to sell it at all, ever, you're going to keep it first for the 30-year mortgage, and then once it's all paid off, keep it. And if I wouldn't even suggest selling, once you own a home outright, I don't see any reason to sell it. You may have some desperate need for the cash. I'd just use the equity that's in the property. My feeling would be, particularly if you're someone who's looking to downsize, and this is a speech I give all my sellers who are looking to downsize. We examine the possibility of them not selling the house at all, simply buying another home, keeping this, and renting it. And what surprises me is how few. And before we jump into some suggestions on that point, if you start thinking that way, even if you don't end up executing on it, you're going to find yourself buying smarter if you kind of think these investment-related thoughts when you're making your purchase. Remember, you don't make your money when you sell your property. You make your money when you buy it. It's the terms under which you purchase it that are really going to dictate how successful you are with that property, no matter why you're buying it, right? So if you're someone who can be a little bit more savvy, stand back a little bit, and divorce emotion from the experience, and I know that's going to be hard. Even me saying these words, that was virtually impossible for me to do because I wasn't the only one making the decision. My wife is very much a person who, or my ex-wife now, was very much a person who was driven more by emotional needs than an expediency than by wanting to analyze something critically or taking a more practical approach to analyzing whether or not property A, B, or C made more sense. So if you have someone like that in your life who is going to be and should be a huge part of the decision-making process, more power to you. Do what you can do to do the right thing. Maybe have that conversation with them. Maybe you own the home search process until you find properties you think make sense, and then that's when they get brought into the home search process. Now, that may or may not fly with whoever your partner in life is, but if that's the roles that you kind of assume in life, if that's the way one of you are and the other one isn't, and you can acknowledge that fact, maybe you can just make yourself a more powerful buying team by acknowledging that and moving forward. Now, one thing I was going to suggest is that when you do come to that, I think so many people are surprised to learn how easy it is to get a loan on a property when you already own one. Obviously financial numbers need to work out, but if you're going to rent the place, typically all that you need in order for that escrow to finally close on buying the new place is a signed rental agreement between you and the folks who are going to rent it once you guys move out. In some cases, you don't even need that, depending on your financial situation, your financial standing. If you own that property outright, let's say you've work through this process, and maybe this is only one of many properties you own, but you've paid it all off. You decide you want to downsize, or it's a 2-story home and you've reached that point in life where stairs are not your friend. I mentioned stairs specifically because that's where I injured my knee. So the next house I own is not going to have stairs. You know what? The creepy thing is, it wasn't even on the stairs. It wasn't even in the stairs that take me up to the second floor of my house. It was just the entry hall to my house is sunken, and there's a bedroom and an office downstairs, and there's just 2 steps to go up to that area and go to the downstairs bedroom in my office, and those are the stairs that got me with my knee. So I feel like a moron. I wish I had a more that's what I should do. I should ask my listeners for the sexier story of how I hurt my knee. So if you want to send those to me, go on over to www.therebelbroker.com and make a suggestion on the sexiest story on how Robert hurt his kneecap or how he tore his tendon. And we'll put those together. Maybe we can vote on them, make it fun. And then I'll maybe make T-shirts. So that'll be fun. In any event, so I think even if you're someone who wants to maybe dabble in investing in real estate, or you're entertained by the idea, just by going through and considering your options, by just going through and thinking about it, or applying an investor's mindset to any purchase you make, even if it's not an investment, I think you might find yourself coming out better on the other side if you've engaged some of those gears of your head, right? So that was the first little myth they came up with. The next one is from Selena Morangian. Her opener here is, it can be easy to convince yourself that you can get rich by buying and renting out properties. Simple math can certainly seem to suggest that. Buy a home with a $1,200 mortgage payment, collect $1,600 in rent, and boom, profits and growing equity in the property. What follows is a profound assumption that you are an idiot. Or maybe not an idiot, maybe just ignorant of what the costs are associated with a property. Because remember, when we've sort of gone down the fundamental list of calculating whether or not it makes sense for you to purchase a home as a rental property, we've listed on one column, you list everything that it will cost you to hold that property, what the servicing costs, so whatever the loan costs you, whatever, if you have a second loan or if you have mortgage insurance, whatever, any dollar amount associated with you holding that property must be on the cost list. So that will be the mortgage that you're paying. That'll be any HOA fees you might be paying. That'll be any other monthly things that you'll be paying that you're not passing on to the renter. That will be, like for my vacation rental in Hawaii, for instance, I pay water, I pay electricity, I pay phone, I pay internet, all those other wonderful things. So those are all bills I have to pay every month, regardless of whether it's rented. So those are all calculated in there. Property taxes, assessments, whatever. So, but what she says here is that, quote, while you own the home, you might be collecting rent payments, but you'll also be making property tax payments and paying for insurance, maintenance, and repairs. Many homeowners across America enjoy tax breaks on the homes they live in, but those discounts disappear when it comes to investment properties. Well, yeah. Okay, so what you're basically saying here is, if you were dumb enough to go through this process of evaluating whether or not you should rent this house, and you didn't take into account property taxes, property insurance, maintenance, and repairs, maybe this isn't the business for you, or maybe you've got a little bit more learning to do. So I'm not really sure how this is a myth. This is you didn't do your math, actually. So it's still an M word. It still has 4 letters. In fact, it shares all but one letter. So maybe she thought they were asking, what's a math problem for people in real estate? Maybe that was what they were asking, and they were saying myth, but she thought they were saying math. She goes on to say, and again, this is another thing that's I think the number one thing for renters. In terms of if you're going to be your own landlord. But she also mentions here, many renters don't or can't make payments on time. You'll also have to deal with calls at inopportune times to fix a leaky roof or replace a refrigerator that stopped working. You may face unexpected necessary repairs. Okay, all true. But the bottom line is you're supposed to, part of the, again, just like doing your homework up front when you're purchasing a home is really what's going to determine whether or not you make money. One of the other things that's going to determine whether or not you make money when you're doing a long-term rental is evaluating your tenants and not just taking people who sign up. Right? They need to apply to be a renter. And once you've gone through their background checks and once they have passed a meticulous go over by you or someone you hire to do it, and I strongly suggest if you don't feel skilled at doing a background check, you hire someone to do it because it's the best insurance you'll ever buy. I mean, all those horror stories that you've probably ever heard, if you dig down deep enough, you're going to discover that somewhere at the beginning of that process, somebody did not check that person out. You may have been that absolutely unlucky person who came across that renter who did it, who just suddenly broke out of their shell and became the horrible renter. But odds are, you look at someone close enough and you really follow up on those references they've given you, you're going to discover what you need to discover in order to realize you shouldn't be renting to those folks. And I don't consider myself the absolute all-star of tenant checking, but I'll tell you what, I've done my share, and it costs a little money online to do some of these different background checks that you can now do. There's even some websites that do an absolutely fantastic job of doing it for a relatively small fee. So there's really no excuse. It's really about just doing your homework. And as far as the inopportune times to fix a leaky roof, etc., yeah, all true, unless you have a property management firm, which would be another thing you'd account for. If you want to have a property manager, great, do it. But again, calculate for that in terms of a cost associated with your property. So what this is less a list of myths and more a list of things you really need to do if you're going to be a landlord. Maybe I guess the overall myth she's trying to point out here is that folks overestimate how easy it's going to be a property owner, a landlord, when it comes right down to it. And in some areas it's going to be more difficult than others because there are a lot more laws preventing you from being able to evict folks who aren't paying their rent in a timely manner. So you account for that. You take into account the idea that the regulations and legislation of your state may prevent you from doing things in a timely fashion. So how do you do that? All right. So one thing you're going to do, obviously, is you're going to take a certain amount of money per month and put that aside for necessary repairs. You're going to figure it out. Now, if you're buying this home completely in the dark, you may not be able to come up with a reasonable number right off the bat. But take a look at what's in the house. Is the roof relatively new? And the things that you're providing, how are they doing in terms of life? Are they near the end of their life? Find out what the cost of replacing the heater or the air conditioner or that ceiling fan or whatever is, and create a list of what it would cost to replace each of those items. And then for a replacement fee, kind of amortize that over a certain period of time and use that as part of your calculation that you're figuring in on a month-to-month basis of what you expect that you're going to have to save in order to replace those. Now, you can take the expected lifespan of, say, a heater, say it's a 20-year lifespan, you've used up 10, so you need to start saving now to buy a new one 10 years from now, so you need to amortize that cost to replace over 10 years, right? And you do that for each thing. Roof, you can do the same thing, amortize to give an expectation. Now, I've done this with a few different properties with a few different investors, and I have yet to have an investor come back and be bummed that when it came to that year the roof was supposed to be replaced, they didn't have to replace it, but they had that money in the bank, right? It's never the way it works. You're never upset that you ended up not spending that $12,000 on the roof that you thought you were going to have to spend at the end of a certain time. But the fact that you've amortized that out over your software you're using also gives you a heads up that, hey, this is the time when I should start be worrying about my roof, and I might want to have a roof inspector come out, take a look at it, see where I stand, and see if it's something I might want to replace soon. So anticipate these things and assume they're going to happen, because eventually they are, and then you'll always have the funds you need to be there if you've budgeted for them. This last one from Dan Kaplinger is, I didn't even really highlight it or give it much thought, and here's why. Quote, there's a common misconception that the only way to invest in real estate is by directly owning properties. As a result, while many people are comfortable with the idea of buying residential properties like vacation homes or even duplexes or small apartment buildings, the prospect of venturing into the commercial real estate realm seems out of reach due to the greater complexity involved in working with business tenants to meet their needs. And then it's basically a pitch for you to consider real estate investment trusts. And I guess if you're someone who is kind of interested in real estate, but you have no desire to get into the nitty gritty of retail space, office buildings, industrial facilities, or niche markets like hospitals, healthcare facilities, rental storage units, that type of thing, that you see those as interesting investments, but you want to be absolutely passive in terms of just doing it as a real estate investment trust thing, great. I'm not really seeing it as a myth. It's not an area I focus on. I prefer the hands-on stuff. I like owning the property. I like being able to drive up to an address and point at it and go, I own that. So love you, Dan. You're fantastic. I'm sure that you're doing great with the REITs. I'm just not an REIT guy. Particularly since for most of these things, it's bundled properties, right? So it's a suite of properties. You know, the sexiest part of real estate for me, it's great that you can earn money doing something you like doing. The sexy part of real estate for me is navigating it. I like the construction process. I like making a thing, and after you're done, people are using it. They're increasing its value just by being in it, right? You've got a home where people are raising a family and creating the next generation that's going to enjoy it. Whether it's maybe it's a business building, and they're creating the next amazing thing for technology. I don't know. And I realize that's a weird angle to take, but maybe it's exactly the weird angle you have to take on something to find your passion for it. And for me, that's one thing about real estate. And I love unique, sort of off-center approaches to real estate. I love some of the stuff I'm seeing some architects do. I love the classic architecture. Not a fan of just the box that drops out of the sky that gets stucco sprayed on the side of it, kind of motif thing. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I think the sexiest part of getting involved in real estate is getting yourself properties, enjoying them, improving them, putting them into a position where they really can be at their highest and best use, and making them available for folks who can benefit from them and get the most out of them themselves, right? So I thought I'd share that with you. I thought it was an odd approach to the idea of what the myths of real estate are. I think if someone asked me to come up with a list of the biggest myths in real estate, I'm not sure I would have come up with much of any of these things. Maybe the myth that being a landlord is easy, but I don't think the myth that being a landlord myth is easy is a myth. I think the myth is that being a landlord is damn near impossible, because it's not. It is actually one of the few things in real estate where I could actually give you a list and say, here are bullet points of all the things that you as a landlord should be thinking and should be doing at each of the critical points. And if you simply just did that, without engaging your creative side, without expanding your knowledge in areas that pertain specifically to the property that you're interested in or that you're trying to be the landlord of, that 90% of the time you're going to come out doing just fine. So it's not even one of those things that's more art than science. I mean, the real estate investor, I guess there's a certain amount of art to it. There's a certain amount of things you realize to be true about a property simply because you've been looking at properties for so many years. But so much of it is a formula. It's just, just do it. Just do it. Just do the list of things that you need to do to not be an idiot. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to come out okay. I'll go ahead and include the link to this not particularly useful article, just so you can review it yourselves and see if you agree with me. If you don't, please feel free to get in contact with me. You can find me at www.therebelbroker.com. Just click on Contact the Rebel Broker in the upper right-hand side. And as always, if you would like to share your love for the show by visiting whatever means you use to consume it and give it a thumbs up, stars, smiley face, whatever, that absolutely helps to grow the show. And my number one goal as we head into 2016 is to increase my audience, and only you folks who are listening now can help me do that. So if you could take a few minutes out of your busy day to share the show with someone else, or just share a review or give some feedback on the show, that'd be greatly appreciated. It'd be a great Christmas gift to give to the show. And of course, God, I didn't mention this all through the show. Things will be a little weird, a little out of sync for the next week or two. Head on over to www.audible.com/rebel to take advantage to 1 month, 1 free book offer at Audible. And by using the link www.audibletrial.com/rebel, you will not only be taking advantage of this great free offer, but you'll also be helping out the show. So with that, I will say goodbye, and I look forward to talking to you all next time.